So welcome everyone. Thank you for sharing some of this busy week with me. My name is Hedel Thacker. I'm a learning and teaching consultant with LS&A Technology Services. And I'm going to be talking today about student engagement and how thinking about classroom culture can lead to better learning and engagement for our students and hopefully, better experience for us, in that same line. So I thought we would start with a scenario, and I'm going to read this just in case someone is not, looking at their screen right now, but I want you to be thinking about probably you'll be thinking, I can relate to this or I can't relate to this. But we just think about, how you would help out Dr. Emily Rodriguez here. So Dr. Emily Rodriguez teaches a large introductory psychology course with 150 students enrolled. Dr. Rodriguez is passionate about her subject and strives to make her lectures engaging. However, she has noticed a troubling trend. Attendance has been steadily declining over the past few weeks. Dr. Rodriguez is committed to not grading attendance because she understands that students may have valid reasons for missing a class, such as illness or personal responsibilities. It's also difficult to take attendance in such a large class. To accommodate students who can't attend, she records all of her lectures, a practice she believes is essential for accessibility and equity. However, she suspects that the availability of these recordings might be contributing to the low in-person attendance. Dr. Rodriguez is concerned that the declining attendance is affecting student engagement and learning outcomes. She feels that the in-person experience with opportunities for interaction and real-time feedback is crucial for students to fully grasp the material. I'll just give you kind of 10, 15 seconds to think about that where I'm not talking. Okay, so in this scenario, I would argue we could break this down to basically two essential questions. One is, how can Dr. Rodriguez create a compelling reason for students to attend the live lectures despite the availability of recordings? And then two, how can she balance the need for flexibility with the goal of fostering a more interactive and participatory classroom environment? You might be thinking there are other questions here that you could derive from that scenario, and I would love to hear them. I'm curious though, can you relate at all to Dr. Rodriguez's experience? Has anybody, maybe you've, experienced this yourself, heard from colleagues who've had this experience? So I thought we could work on helping Dr. Rodriguez out here. What is some feedback that we can give her? And we're going to use for that a Miro board, and I am going to share that with you. Oh, actually, Rachel, who, by the way, is here as our moderator, she had just put in the chat the link to the Miro board, and someone just came in, Rachel, so if you could just copy it into the chat one last time, that would be helpful. And hopefully when you follow that link, and I see a few of you have joined here, we are in the screen now, right? This Miro board screen. If you've used Jamboard before, this is very similar to Jamboard. When you're looking at the screen, you're probably seeing a lot fewer items on your toolbar on your left. But if you see the square with the little corner up, it's going to be a sticky note. And you can click on the sticky note and you can add a sticky note anywhere you want with your ideas here for Dr. Rodriguez. And so what I've done is I've separated, it really doesn't matter where you're putting your feedback, but I did offer here the two questions, those two essential questions. How can she create a compelling reason for students to attend the live lectures? And how can she balance the need for flexibility with the goal of fostering a more interactive and participatory classroom environment? So if we can I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes and maybe just think about how we might respond, how we can kind of give some feedback to Dr. Rodriguez. I'll go ahead and let you think about that. All right, I see. Looks like I'm not seeing any more new post-its. I'll give you 10 more seconds here. Okay, so I really like make class fun. And hopefully we can talk more about how we might do that here in a little bit. Include interactive activities that allow students to engage with one another. So it's a lot of kind of engagement activities, community building activities, want to kind of make students want to attend. I think those are really great suggestions. These are things that, it kind of feel like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish that the subject matter spoke to, for itself. But the reality is when you have a lecture course and, sometimes even with the seminar courses, if you're have a class for non-majors, it can be hard to get that student engagement otherwise. And then for how can she balance the flexibility, provide low stakes group activities that give extra points, attendance via non-graded quizzes or exit tickets. That's awesome. I like this suggestion of only posting lectures for 24 or 48 hours. Um, and out of class activities that are group corrected in class. So what I like about a lot of these suggestions is that you're taking into consideration the logistics of the grading and the balancing of many students. And I think that's all really good suggestions. So we're going to go back to the presentation. So I had a feeling that you would all have these really great ideas, which is why I added some of them here. Yes, absolutely. Incorporating interactive elements. Live polling can be a good way to do that, something like iClicker, if Dr. Rodriguez has access to iClicker like we do. And problem solving case studies, those interactive elements that you were all mentioning, those are really helpful. Low stakes incentives, many of you mentioned those as well. So you were right on the ball with that. A third one I would include is to talk to your students about the kind of research that supports the benefits of attendance. So, this source here is a meta-analysis of the relationship between class attendance and college grades. And what they found is that, attendance has a strong relationship with class grades, and that these relationships make class attendance a better predictor of college grades than any other known predictor of academic performance. So it's a really interesting study that they've done, or analysis that they've done. I think the quote here at the bottom is really compelling, which is that, even if a small proportion of that relationship is causal, right? Because the argument could be made that it's, not causal, it's just correlational. But they're saying that even if just a small portion of this is causal, the findings are significant enough that it's still impactful. Um, so sharing that information with your students, right? I think often our conversations about attendance only happen after it becomes a problem with our students, right? And then it's a defensive conversation. And, it might be coming from a place of frustration on your part, or defensiveness from the students' parts. And one way of dealing with that is to show it as a positive, right? That there are benefits. Like, we're not telling you to show up just because it's their cogs in the machine or something. There's like actual real research-based reason to attend class, that those students do better. And sharing that with students can be really helpful. So aside from that, I think one thing that can really help us is thinking about who our students are here today in fall of 2024. And this is a book called The Real World of College. Fishman and Gardner are two Harvard researchers. They spent 5 years interviewing students, faculty, and other folks to explore the state of, college campuses in the United States. And they determined that 45% of students have a transactional attitude about college. And what they mean by that is that those students are focused on getting the degree, getting the skills, getting the networking that they need to pursue successful careers, right? And so this might compare to students who are there for growth or for learning, or, because they have a passion for paleontology or whatever it might be. And they take it a step further and they say that those students then are less likely to develop what they call higher educational capital. And that's the ability to attend, analyze, reflect, connect, communicate, all of those higher order, activities that we want our students to demonstrate. And a lot of those terms are also really, grounded, our learning outcomes are often grounded in those terms too. So we have 45% of our students who are really not, are struggling to develop these skills. And yet so many of our courses are kind of foundationally built on analysis and reflection and, making connections and all of that stuff. And so we're seeing this real kind of disconnect between, who we maybe are creating our courses for and who our students are. And then knowing that, it's clear how we get to statements like this. So if the goal is a transaction, then anything that makes that transaction more efficient is going to be welcome, right? If my goal is I need to get the A as easily as possible, as quickly as possible, right? Then I'm going to prioritize. And if I can just watch a recording and it's the same experience as being in class in my perception, then why wouldn't I do that, right? If that's my point of view. So that maybe gives us, a little bit of a sense of who some of our students are. And then we compare that maybe to our perception of the college experience. And maybe this is naive or idealistic, but surely some of us became, got into this field because we like learning, right? We like following our curiosity. We did experience college as a place of personal growth, or this idea of like we're with like-minded people who are interested in learning, and have this really oh captain, my captain, experience when you are in when you were an undergrad or when you were in graduate school. So here we have these really kind of disparate views of what college is for and what the college classroom is for. And so if we are if this is the model that we're using and our students are thinking, I just need connections in my LinkedIn, that's really my goal here. Those are two really, really different perspectives when it comes to kind of who is your audience for um, what you are learning. And I'm seeing questions in the chat and just keep adding them there. And there should surely be time to get to those at the end. So on top of the shift in student perception about college comes the pandemic. And the term great disengagement comes from this 2022 article by Mark Labelle and for the Center for Environmental Policy and Behavior at UC Davis. So he makes the case that the trauma and isolation of COVID and ensuing pivot to virtual learning have all led to a shift in students' outlook regarding higher ed. So those students saw an alternative way to get a grade that felt easier, more convenient. But then he argues that the consequences have been pretty severe. So he says, this is one of the reasons why we've got student faculty apathy, burnout, why students are learning at a lower rate, that there's been this negative impact to student culture and community, and that there's been an impact to what he calls research creativity. And what he's talking about here are those spontaneous conversations you end up having when, you're the kind of the quote unquote water cooler conversations with other researchers that sometimes lead to some serious aha moments, right? Where, you're chatting and you realize, oh, you have similar research interests. And, oh, I was thinking about working on that too. And, maybe you've led to a partnership or to a new insight. So he sees all of these as impacts to this great disengagement. We've also seen an increase in students coming to campus with anxiety, with depression, concerns about fitting in. So we're going to have a little poll. I'm going to ask you a question here. This is a Zoom poll, so it should pop up for you. So my question is, so according to the National Survey of Student Engagement, what percentage of first-year students do you think had substantial increases in depression, hopelessness, or loneliness? Just going to give another 10 seconds in case anybody else wants to respond. So looks like 55, I'm sorry, 9 of you said 55%, and that is the correct answer. And I have one more question for you. So another survey, which we'll be talking about, is the Healthy Minds study of college students. They found that what percentage of students were considering suicide? This one surprised me. Okay, show you kind of the 3% of you, I'm sorry, 2 of you said 3%, 9 of you said 10%, and 2 of you said 15%. So let's talk about it. So the student survey of engagement was from 2021. And as we said, it did show that 55% of students had substantial increases, first-year students in depression, hopelessness, or loneliness because of COVID. The 2023 survey I thought was interesting, the Healthy Mind survey. They surveyed more than 90,000 students across 133 US campuses. And you can go to their website and they have a map of all of the campuses that they surveyed. And our campus, Ann Arbor, was included in that. So these are our students as well. And you'll see there that number, 15% said that they were considering suicide, which just seems mind-bogglingly high to me. But so this is, certainly something, and I know having talked to faculty that you are kind of the front line here, right? When it comes to a lot of our students sharing their struggles with mental health, their struggles with anxiety and stress. And so a lot of you, I've heard from have told me that, this is definitely something that is an important issue that you have to think about and take into consideration. And in the real world of college, Fishman and Gardner also asked a question regarding mental health, and they found that 42% of students and 66% of the adults on campus rank mental health as the most important issue at their schools. So clearly, this is a college level issue. This is, I think, higher ed as a field, right? We have to deal with this. But also, I think keeping this in mind as you are, in the classroom is also important. And I'm sure that you have had those experiences, had those situations where you've had to, have those conversations with students. So I think we've laid out the quote unquote problems here, right? The situation, which is how do we address a shift in attitude about higher ed, lasting impacts of the pandemic, sorry, it's typo there, growing mental health crisis, and how all of that impacts what goes on in the classroom, right? And you might be thinking, okay, so that's a lot to, be thinking about here when I am creating my course. And so rather than, again, kind of focusing on the negative, right, let's think about how we can create this positive classroom culture for our students that can address a lot of these issues. I like this definition of classroom culture as something that has shared values, rules, traditions, belief patterns, behaviors, and relationships in a class, right? And the idea is that even if you're not actively trying to develop a classroom culture, it's there, right? It is being created, whether implicitly or explicitly. And so I would argue then that it should be explicit, right? So if you create the class that you want it to be. The difference, I think, between like capital C culture and this, of course, is that you've got a short span of time to create this cultural experience and benefit from it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies for addressing that. But I also did like this other definition of culture. So this is an educator, but also kind of a business person, Seth Godin, who said, culture is basically people like us do things like this. And I thought that's another really good way of thinking about it, in that it's putting it in the positive, right? That people like us are going to do things like this, not necessarily that, you're doing this, so you are not like us. And so kind of framing things as a positive is a good starting place. So how can you rebuild classroom culture? So if you're going off of what LaBelle is saying, that one of the things that we have lost over the course of the pandemic and just that we've been untrained on is how to be in a classroom, right? How to be in community with one another in the classroom. So first of all, right, is a matter of just saying it. So define what you want your class to be. This is a space where blank, right? Articulate for yourself and your students what your role is in the class. So are you the fount of information at at the head of the lecture hall? Are you the guide on the side, right? Maybe is this a team-based learning class and you're able to kind of guide your students along? How are you going to wield your power? You are in a power relationship with your students, whether you like it or not. And so thinking about what that means to you and communicating that to your students is really important. So if you don't, that makes you feel icky or uncomfortable, and you don't think that's the role that you have, share that with your students. It's really important for them to understand the roles, right? Think about culture. The roles in a culture, they need to be kind of clearly laid out. And explain your vision for your classroom community. So if you want your class to feel communal in nature, if you want it to feel like a community, you need to tell your students that, right? They need to know, they need to hear that from you. And then mean it, right? So it's not enough to just say it, we have to do it too. So model the behaviors and expectations that you want to see. If you value curiosity and inquiry and critical thinking, find ways to demonstrate that for yourself and then provide your students with opportunities to practice it. If you're saying that you value inquiry and you value curiosity, but class is really just lecture and then, exams, where are students getting the chance to actually practice those things? So finding ways to do that, and that was a lot of your advice to Dr. Rodriguez, was dealing with that, right? Those interactive moments, the ways that you can make your class more engaging. And this comes from my my colleague Terry Horton. We did a presentation on the culture of care last year, and she had a slide, and the title of the slide was "You're a Person, Show It," and I just really like that. And that's a big part of kind of developing that community, getting that student buy-in is showing your students who you are, right? This is a great quote: "Students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And this is going to come back later. We're going to look at some student quotes, and we'll see just how true this really is. But this idea that part of that culture is developing relationships, both between students and with you. And in order to do that, you kind of have to show, that you are a person outside of just your role. And if you're like me, when I was coming up, I was told that I wasn't supposed to do that, or I wasn't supposed to be a person outside of the classroom, that I wouldn't get respect from my students if they knew too much, personal information about me. And so that was a lot of unlearning that happened for me, especially during the pandemic. And you might find that it is kind of an uncomfy thing for some of us to do. But students really care about knowing about us, right? Learning about us. So this is from Who Cares? Developing a Pedagogy of Caring in Higher Education. Basically, it was a qualitative study of 20 students at a major university that were asked to share their impressions about caring behaviors by their instructors. So the first quote, I'm going to read it in case someone's not looking at their screen. "I had some great teachers that I was very close to in high school, and thought I knew college would be a little different. I didn't expect to be almost completely ignored as a person here." So we're thinking about how our students are already stressing and have anxiety about fitting in and are feeling depressed. And now they are feeling ignored too, right? This quote is from a different student. When I know I am a higher priority to my professor than their own personal interests or goals, I feel cared for. Professors do this by getting out of themselves, smiling and enjoying their time with us as students. having a good sense of humor, and preparing lessons that have current meaning to us as students. I think the student wraps so much advice into this quote, right? But it's about verbal cues and nonverbal cues and interactive courses, and there's so much going on here. But again, showing that students are definitely in tune with who you are as a person, regardless of whether or not you're sharing that. So in the same article, the author outlines these 8 behaviors of care, is what they call it. And the first is the verbal expression, right? Which I kind of mentioned earlier, the say it part, right? So a lot of this is telling them that you care. And it can be that simple, right? And once you've told them, then the next part is the nonverbal, show it in your face. So many students in this study talked about eye contact and how it made a difference when their professors made eye contact with them, even in the lecture hall, or one-on-one, they're not distracted. They're looking at me in my face. They're looking in my eyes. So I know they're paying attention. So I know that they care. Something as simple as eye contact. Knowing student names. So a couple students talked about how even if it was a large lecture and there were too many students, my professor was never going to learn everyone's name, but they tried. They made the attempt to learn, and that was all that matters. Again, that is that, clearly showing that you care, that you want to learn. There's a difference between I'm going to try to learn your names, maybe I mess up, versus I'm not going to try to learn your names. There's too many of you, so I'm not going to try. Right? There's something so distancing about saying such, that type of thing. And so making the effort can go a long way. There was a really interesting comment about office hours, and the student was essentially saying that I need to know that or that a professor is going to help me, that going to be helpful and caring before I'll bother going to office hours. And that seems a little tricky, right? Because how can you show that you care if you don't get that time with them? But I think the point that the student was making is that whether or not that student went to office hours was really dependent on a lot of these other factors. That do I already feel safe with this professor? And if so, then I'm going to be more likely to go to office hours. I'm hoping you're not hearing the construction in this room. And then a feeling of care, that sometimes that the professor's attitude is what they really get a sense of, that they can connect to. And then developing appropriate relation is this idea that I need to know you as a person in order to really connect with you. That are there little tidbits you can share about yourself, right? Or about your day or whatever it might be that can again, those community building activities that you mentioned are a good place to do that. How do you respond to questions and concerns, right? Are you good about answering questions? Are you good about providing space to ask questions? And are those questions thoughtfully considered? And then, are you trying to make it relevant? Are you trying to make it interesting for students? So these are what comes from those interviews with those 20 students. So just a couple quotes that I thought were really, really great from these students. So this one is actually from a student. I have a class where there are 400 people, so there was no way a teacher could get to know every one of us. Instead, he was very animated and enthused about being with us. You could tell he was just excited. He laughed and smiled a lot, and you could tell by looking at him that he enjoyed what he was doing. He moves his hand, he gets out from behind his desk and walks close to us. Because he does that, he doesn't have to go get to know every single one of us. He cared for us by his attitude. So I think this is really compelling that, the amount of leniency the student is giving this professor just based on their enthusiasm, their warmth, that kind of the feel that they get from the professor, that it's okay that you don't know my name because you clearly are showing that you care about this subject and you care about connecting with us. Last one. This one is actually from a professor making a really good point, I think. Most of my students have just barely left home. They are used to having parents, coaches, teachers, religious leaders, and others who form a very strong support system for them. So when they come to college for the first time, they often struggle because they don't have anybody. They don't know who to turn to when they need help. And because you represent an authority figure, you're there in front of them like their trusted network of people used to be. They want you to care. And so when you tell them you care and they hear it said in class, the walls come down. They're ready to have a caring relationship. They're ready to let you in. And most of the time, all you have to do is tell them. A really important point about the role kind of that we play, and that I think also goes again to that student experience of having the support system and then having to kind of recreate that at a new place. So this is a lot, right? This is talking about kind of building that classroom community, building those norms in your class of what you want to see, and then engaging with your students in order to get them to show up and care and participate. So our team, the Learning Teaching Consulting team, we can help with so much of this. We have tools, engagement tools like iClicker, social annotation tools. We have community building chat and discussion tools. We can talk to you about team-based learning and flipped course design if you want to try alternative course design to address some of these issues. We can help you with online and remote pedagogy and assignment design or redesign. And multimedia support. So if you want to try, a visual assignment, an audio-visual essay, you want to try a podcast, you want to try something different, we are the team that can help you with that. And so we are available. You can just email us and we're happy to help with that.